This is Franchise Today, brought to you by FRM Solutions, providers of the best-in-class software solutions for franchise relationship management. Franchise Today is your destination for weekly information, conversations, and interviews with accomplished industry leaders, all of whom share best practices for sustainable growth and sensible franchising. Here now, your host, Stan Friedman, to kick off this week's podcast.
Today is Wednesday, August 21st, 2024. I'm Stan Friedman, and this is Franchise Today. Well, this week's guest provides yours truly with a couple of really special treats, and I can't wait to tell you all about that, and will in just a few moments. But first, one last thanks to Jamie Isaacs, co-founder, president, and CEO of All Points Public Relations, for bringing us his inspiring story last week. In the almost 20 years I've known Jamie, I had no idea the depth of his previous experience, nor that he spent 5 years of his life building character by pushing himself beyond the bounds of his comfort zone and taking an early career-building job at a TV station someplace much colder and snowier than his native Chicago. True, it was only last week that I learned that Jamie Isaacs spent almost 5 years of his life in Fairbanks, Alaska. This week, yet again, a longtime friend and peer joins me. Brett Larrabee treats me too to some news about his early days in the franchise and restaurant industry that I was totally unaware of. Not only was I surprised to learn that Brett was in town, my hometown, opening up a restaurant, but it was also the first unit in the USA for a well-established Ukrainian brand. And that wasn't the last of Brett's surprises. More followed when I interviewed him for this episode of Franchise Today, as it was only then that I learned that Brett was a franchisee for nearly 20 years before ever becoming a franchisor, that he was the very first Subway franchisee in Seattle, Washington. And if that's not enough, it was Subway founder Fred DeLuca himself that personally set Brett up in that business. But lest I steal all of his thunder, enough said about that for now. Instead, a quick reminder to check out our website at www.franchisetodaypodcast.com, where you'll find hundreds of interviews with other icons of the industry, available for streaming or download, dating back some 15 years. You'll also find summaries of the interviews, show notes, blog posts, and of course, the opportunity to drop a review that lets others know how much you enjoy listening to Franchise Today. So if you'll do that for me, it will be much appreciated. Okay, how about a quick time out here, and when I return, I'll be joined by yet another great guy with a great story sure to inspire. Don't go away. Brett Larrabee's up next.
Franchise Today will be right back, but first, a word from our sponsors.
We are all familiar with Vistage, YPO, and EO. Well, now comes Zor Forum, a somewhat similar type of executive group, but this one comes with a twist. Zor Forum groups are exclusively for franchisors. Imagine a peer group for sharing and networking on a platform built exclusively for franchise executives. Zor Forum members are afforded unparalleled access to best practices and some of the brightest minds within the franchising world, through regular meetings and a dedicated communications platform. In this post-COVID world, a franchise-specific mastermind or peer group is an endeavor worth making time for. Zor Forum groups of 6 to 10 will bring leaders together that are in similar situations, but with exclusivity in terms of their competitive sets, so that each can openly help others benefit from their respective knowledge, perspective, and experience with no fear of competitive loss. Network, learn, strategize, and remain motivated along your journey. Join a peer group, not just any peer group. Join the only one designed for emerging franchisors. Join Zor Forum. Learn more at zorforum.com. That's www.zorforum.com. After nearly 40 years of developing U.S. brands across the country and around the world for such iconic restaurant chains as Five Guys, Little Caesars, Panchero's Mexican Grills, and Famous Dave's Barbecue, Brett Larrabee has flipped the script and joins us today as CEO of Lviv USA, the American division of Lviv Croissants, a nearly 200-unit-strong Ukrainian brand that opened its first USA store last week right here in Roswell, Georgia. While I've known Brett Larrabee for nearly 15 years, I learned a ton about him that I never knew, and he's here right now to share it all with you too. Brett Larrabee, welcome to Franchise Today.
Oh, thank you. It's an incredible honor to be here.
Well, it's an honor to have you here, Brett. Does the number 1,347 ring any bells for you?
No, but I'm sure it's a lucky number.
Well, it's the number of people that you and I are tiered one connected to on LinkedIn, which tells me we've both been around a long time, buddy.
That's for sure. I remember my first IFA many, many years ago, and I'm not even sure there were 1,300 people in attendance. But now it's a much bigger deal, and I'm very glad for that.
Well, I am too, and it's more fun every year, but it reminds me too, Brett, that while many of us think that the franchise world is kind of insular and that we're a small group and we talk with passion about how the rest of the world may have 3 degrees of separation, but in franchising, you have to put a decimal point in front of that. And yet there's still a lot of people every week that I get in touch with or get put in touch with for the very first time who I think I should have known for as long as they too have been in franchising, but it may be getting to be a lot bigger than we think in terms of the new people that are entering the space every year.
Yeah, I think that's the magic of franchising is the tent is ever expanding and the actual magic, the information and the abilities of the people that arrive inside that are ever increasing. I know it's definitely up to my game, meeting new people that have new ideas, new thoughts, new brands. And for me, I'm forever grateful because I'm always learning in this business. It just never stops. And sure, there are the same old faces that I talk to, but there are many new faces. And, I really appreciate the sincerity and the gravity that people bring to this business, the sense of absolute desire to do something good. For me, that's what drives me. I think franchising is an opportunity for people to do better than they could do on their own. And that takes a network. It takes a number of people, not just franchisors and franchisees, but vendors and attorneys and accountants and people in marketing and all sorts of disciplines come together to make franchising work. And the blend of ideas and thought and perspectives for me is just fascinating. Every single year, fascinating.
Well, why don't we do this to put the cherry on top of that? Why don't you take us back to when it was that franchising kind of bumped into you, Brett, and give the audience a sense of your background. What were you doing before franchising, and when did franchising and you have that inflection point?
Yeah, as they say, franchising usually finds you, and that was the case. I was going to college in the Pacific Northwest, really thinking I would be a business major, graduating, going to work, with some corporate title in a nice suit in a high-rise building in downtown Seattle. And in fact, that's what I started to do. And then I ran into a guy named Fred DeLuca. He was presenting to a group of entrepreneurs at our school, and I was fascinated. I was just absolutely fascinated with his messaging and his life story and what he had accomplished. And after the seminar presentation, I basically made sure I was the first one up to the stage or the table by the stage where he was sitting. And I asked him, how could I be a part of this? It's just so fascinating to me. And not only did he take the time to talk to me, but he made an appointment after that later on, and we sat down and he explained that there really hadn't been any development of substance in the Seattle area. He'd like me to possibly move ahead as the only franchisee in Seattle at that time. And I said, yes, I'd love to do that. Of course, I had very little money, and really he helped me in so many ways put that first store together. I think we opened that first store with $15,000 and a bucket of hope that it would work. And I remember the store was bright fluorescent yellow with some fake butcher block counters and a few pieces of equipment that Fred helped me lease. And we opened that store with a Coca-Cola menu board and an awning that said Subway sandwiches and salads outside. And I was so proud. I absolutely thought I had reached the first milestone of my business career. And then we opened the store and it was an absolute failure. It was so hard to watch almost no one show up for the first few days. And then I remember asking my mom, maybe I should go bankrupt. And she said, you can't go bankrupt. You're more or less judgment proof. You have no money. So just take the risk you need to take and lean into this. And I did. And I kind of became the Jimmy John's of fast sub delivery before Jimmy John's even existed. We bought a bunch of scooters and we started delivering to downtown Seattle business offices, and it worked. and my simple Subway shop that nobody showed up to turned into a real phenomenal success, delivering sandwiches to downtown Seattle. It was great. It was great to be able to be engaged in a business format that had already been planned out for me, and yet I could make some decisions like delivery that turned the business into a real success. And over the years, I had Subways in Seattle, a number of Subways in Seattle for 20 years. Subway grew exponentially around me and around the world. And there are a lot of very challenged franchisees who came in the system and started to fail. And Fred reached out and said, hey, can you work with development agents and multi-unit franchisees to develop some systems to scale their business and grow their sales? And that's what I did. That's kind of how I moved over to the franchisor side and became a support mechanism for franchisees near and far. And it really started to work. And my network of people in franchising grew. And then over the years, I worked with a number of other brands like Panchero's Mexican Grill, Five Guys Burgers and Fries, Famous Dave's Barbecue, and then later in my career, Little Caesars international footprint. And that's what kind of brought me over to the international side of the business. And I spent a lot of time in Eastern Europe, Ukraine, Russia, Kazakhstan, almost every stan there is, and then Baltic states, growing the Little Caesars franchise business, which was phenomenal. I mean, the stores that we opened internationally were very successful. And it was a great opportunity not only to learn the business from the inside out as a franchisee, but also learn from other franchisees who, some of them were far more skilled than I in different disciplines. And I just got to absorb all that information, and it just brought me to this point.
And for those who don't know who Fred DeLuca was, he was the founder of Subway. And then were you with Famous Dave's when Dave was still in the business?
Oh, yeah. Every day with Famous Dave was a blessing because he taught me so many things, not the least of which is why Famous Dave's is famous. He started selling barbecue at Indian powwows out of garbage cans. Literally, the garbage cans were a smoker, and he was good at it. People loved his barbecue. And then he opened literally a restaurant in the middle of the woods in Wisconsin. Getting there not only took a map, but a lot of patience because it really wasn't close to anything. And he ordered the sign, and the sign was supposed to be Dave's Famous Barbecue, but the sign guy kind of screwed up and he called it Famous Dave's. And Dave didn't have enough money at that time to reorder the sign, so he just ran with it. And what he told me he learned is nobody's going to make you famous. Nobody is going to step up and say, hey, you're famous, you're something important that we should pay attention to. You have to do that yourself. You have to claim that for yourself, and you need to give people reasons why you're famous. And now so many people, they go viral for so many different reasons. And I think back every time I see somebody finding phenomenal success on social media or wherever it is, how Dave really brought himself to the center of the plate really with barbecue. And he built a big, phenomenal business. I mean, he took that company public with 25 stores, which I think is a pretty bold move. And to this day, although Dave may or may not be as involved as much as he used to be, I think that business still rides on the cachet that he built. And I tell you, that's not only a man who has genius, but somebody that really spreads the idea of love. In fact, he has a charity, I forget the name, but love is part of the name. And what it really teaches is that you need to bring energy and enthusiasm and love to your daily life in order to get to that next place, not only for you, but the people around you. And I remember going through the training. He had a very intense training process for this charity and this idea. And it was 2 or 3 days. And I left completely with a ton of enthusiasm and knowledge that I didn't have before. And this is a guy that really walked the walk and talked the talk. He had a phenomenal sense about him and how to work with people. And the franchise business, that's what it is. It's people. It's groups of people that come together with an idea to follow a system to do better in life. And that's something that Famous Dave helped us all pave the trail for.
Great stories, Brett. It's amazing. I know that for all my years in franchising, there's a difference between being a part of a founder-led brand and having that founder still involved. I experienced that with Tony Khan's at Blimpie. And while they were young guys, when they started, Matt and Adam at Wing Zone, my partners there, again, there's just something about it that the hands of the founder mean so much to the culture of the business. And I'm hearing that over and over again in what you're sharing with us here today. Brett, I let you roll there for a long way for the first half of their conversation, but it's because you shared so much and it was too good to stop you. We're going to take a quick break here, though, and we're going to come back talking about some of the experience in Eastern Europe, which has led to what it is you're doing today. And I'm excited for you, and I'm excited to share with the audience what it is that's going on with Lviv Croissants and you bringing a brand to America to kick it off here with about 189 or 190 units already behind you, proving the concept in Eastern Europe. So hang in there. We're going to come right back and continue the conversation with Brett Larrabee, CEO at Lviv USA. Don't go away.
Franchise Today will be right back, but first, a word from our sponsors.
Franchise Today is brought to you by FRM Solutions, offering the only CRM tool built exclusively for franchising that lets you have it your way. Whether you're a single brand needing professional tools across departments or a portfolio of brands needing franchise-specific CRM across the enterprise. Either way, FRM satisfies the needs of many with the power of one. That's right, one single instance of FRM is all it takes across departments or across brands. So if you've had it with inflexible, one-size-fits-all CRM, end your frustration today. FRM offers robust dashboarding, tailored reporting, and with open APIs, FRM pushes, pulls, and integrates with other databases, providing you with a single source of truth. Don't just take my word for it. Visit them at frmsolutions.com and order up a demo today. And we're back with Brett Larrabee. Brett, you and I can, between us, we can tell stories that would last hours, not minutes. And unfortunately, we're in a short form here. So I've got to try to squeeze as much as I can into a short amount of space. But guys like you make that difficult because you've just lived so much in both the franchise and the food world. The stories are endless. And I should point out, to your credit and to the audience, that you're not just a franchise guy, but you're a trained and certified culinary professional. What is the designation?
It's culinary French chef. And this was something I felt compelled to do because I was creating the systems and the processes and the procedures and selling them to so many culinary professionals, and yet I had really no culinary degree. I knew how to manage food costs and run the numbers, but how that food became good and how it was delivered to customers was still a mechanism that I felt I had to evolve to. And I was in New York City developing Five Guys Burgers and Fries, and the opportunity came about to go to culinary school at night. And that's what I did at the French Culinary, and it was probably one of the most challenging things I've ever done. When they say French chefs are tough, what you see on TV is not too far from the truth.
Interesting. Well, Brett, so you're in Eastern Europe, you're selling for Little Caesars, and you're in Ukraine, and you stumbled across something called Lviv. Tell us about Lviv.
Yeah, well, I was in this town called Cherkasy in central Ukraine, which is maybe a town of 150,000 people. And the nightlife there was pretty vibrant. All the cafes were open at night and restaurants, and we would go for a walk. And I walked past this really bright, cozy spot called Lviv Croissants. And there was an A board out front with a picture of this croissant that looked like the size of a football that was a sandwich. And I was fascinated, because that's kind of how I started my career in the sandwich business. And we would walk past it a few times, and it was just always busy, always busy. And part of people ask me all the time, what is it that creates some level of success for you? And it always comes down to one word: curiosity. And so I decided to go in, and I waited probably 10 minutes, 15 minutes for my croissant, thinking maybe that's a little too long, but the place was just so busy, so packed. It was abnormally busy. And once I got my food, it was exactly like the picture. It was this gigantic, fluffy croissant that was full of incredible savory meats and cheeses and sauces. And it was actually just like the billboard said it would be. Not only the picture was the same, but it was delicious. And what was fascinating to me is that, starting with Subway, the thing about Subway is fresh baked bread. And these guys were baking the croissants right inside the store, and you could smell it, and it was incredible. It wasn't a contrived smell. It was just this beautiful, fragrant, almost pastry-like smell that was wafting across the store, and people were drinking coffee and juices and smoothies. And in Ukraine, the average ticket there looked to be about $3 US. Of course, people were paying in hryvnias. But even with that low $3 check, I found out that the stores were doing great numbers by US standards. And it was one of those aha moments that I said, I have to bring this to the US.
And what year are we in when you did this?
2016.
Lee, you've been working on this for a long time.
Oh, yeah. Well, it took probably a year or so to meet the founders in New York City, which we did at the International Franchise Show. And then we sat down and we started really talking in earnest about this, going back and forth. And we finally came to an agreement on how we would partner to bring this to the U.S. And then, gosh, it's a few years back now, I was in Lviv. Lviv is a western city of Ukraine, which has got a 800-year plus history. It's a very old European city, almost on the border with Poland, but not quite, about 10 or 15 miles from the border. And I was in that town to meet at the corporate headquarters with Lviv Croissants, which is no small deal. Lviv Croissants is a now really 180 to 190 unit chain, the biggest food franchise in Ukraine. And their headquarters has 100 plus employees. And we were literally sitting in the conference room watching the news on CNN as the war started to unfold, which actually started in earnest the next week. And it kind of put a little bit of a pause on things. And I guess we all thought maybe all this would last a few weeks, but the weeks became months and the months became years. And it just got to a point where we decided, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it. Let's just do it regardless of the circumstance. And we had a franchisee that was very successful in Ukraine in a city called Kramatorsk, which is now basically the front line. But he did very, very well. He was making an incredible income out of this one store. And he had traveled to Atlanta to visit his son for a wedding, and the war broke out and he kind of got stuck in Atlanta. So the stars aligned. He contacted us. We partnered with him to do a joint venture for the first store in Roswell, Georgia. And then here we are.
And here we are, really here we are, because I'll fill in the next piece of the conversation was my wife bringing to my attention a grand opening taking place in Roswell, Georgia last week. And she reads me the article. And when she got to the name Brett Larrabee, I said, shut up. I said, you're kidding. Brett Larrabee is here. I mean, I live 5 miles from that store. And I was kind of like taken aback, didn't know anything about it. And what did I do? I picked up my phone and called your phone, and I talked with your wife because she said you were too busy to talk to me. And literally the next day, we are there with you enjoying a meal and seeing each other for the first time in too long, and deciding then that the rest of the world's going to learn about Lviv because we're going to have you on the podcast. And here we are. I can't wait to see this take off. There's so much emotional attachment for many. I saw the customer base was almost all Ukrainian. I had no idea there was such a large pocket of Ukrainian transplants in the Atlanta area, but apparently such is the case.
I think Lviv Croissants maybe is a little bit like, I don't know, McDonald's for us, or lack of a better example. You know, when I travel abroad in Asia or Eastern Europe, McDonald's is always a treat for me because it's a little piece of home. And I think for the Ukrainians, that's what Lviv Croissants is. It's a little piece of home. It represents something that's part of their life in Ukraine, uniquely part of their life in Ukraine. And when they see it here, it's the same heartwarming opportunity to kind of go back to their roots. Interestingly, Lviv Croissant is not inherently Ukrainian food. It's specialty coffee, drinks, and savory and sweet croissants. But what makes it special is the quality of it. It is old world quality, old world ingredients, super, super fresh and absolutely delicious, which is really what brought me into this story in the first place. And I think the world is craving that. The world is craving something that's not over-processed, not contrived out of a bag, something that is absolutely delicious. And you crave for more. And that's what Lviv Croissants has. It's a real qualitative difference to the fast casual chains of today. And the store has been extremely busy since we opened. We've had literally hundreds of franchise requests, several of them very serious in Seattle, Chicago, New York, Austin, Phoenix, and almost every major city in between. Part of that is I think food operators are looking for something unique and scalable and simple and flexible that they can build out in a number of opportunities, whether it be drive-through or strip mall or at a university, non-traditional type locations. I think this brand really has that scalability that other brands that I've worked with, like Subway, has. It doesn't need a lot of infrastructure for growth.
I mean, literally, you're in 1,200 square feet here, a little bit crowded with so many kids behind the make line. But what is the footprint supposed to be, or what will it be ideally?
I think the footprint is 1,600 to 2,200 square feet. We started small, really thinking maybe we were a little bit conservative in our approach. But if we've learned anything from this first store in the U.S., as they've learned in Ukraine, these stores are extremely popular. You need a little more space to service that type of volume. And I think 1,600 to 2,200 square feet is about the right number.
Well, Brett, I hope, and I'm certain that I'm right, there are going to be a great many people listening to this that have an interest in finding out more. How do they get in touch with you?
Well, you can go to LvivCroissants.com. You can email me at Brett@franchiseyeti. That's franchiseyeti.com. I look forward to people reaching out, not only about the brand, but other people in the franchise community. I appreciate all the communication and support, and I look forward to seeing this brand really move all across the U.S.
And for the sake of those who don't know how to spell Lviv, would you put that out there for us too?
Sure, it's Lviv Croissants. So Lviv, it's the same word as the town, the city in Ukraine. And I think Lviv, the city of Lviv, is another fascinating story in and of itself. But if Lviv Croissants gives people impetus to learn more, not only about Lviv, but the country, I invite you to do so. It's fascinating.
Well, I'm going to invite the audience to do what I did. I appreciated it, enjoyed the experience at the store and the food, but I came home and I went on YouTube and I looked up Lviv, and I was drawn into what a spectacular, wonderful place this is, and it touched my heart yet again. So I feel really strongly that this is going to catch on and people are going to learn about it because the media is going to hear about it, and you're going to be given the wind at your back in terms of showcasing the opportunities that are available. And I think this is going to be a great thing. We're going to look at this a year from now and we'll be calling you DeLuca. What do you think?
Well, that would be a compliment, but Fred stands head and shoulders above me, and I keep working every day to get to that point for sure.
Fred, it's been a treat having you here. I'm going to keep a close eye on what's going on with the brand across the country, but I ride by that store probably a half dozen times a week, so there's going to be some stopping whether you're in town or not. Brett Larrabee, CEO of Lviv Croissants, Lviv, USA. So glad we got a chance to reconnect and do this, Brett.
Thank you, Stan. I appreciate everything.
Well, that's a wrap for today. Next week, we're joined by franchise lawyer extraordinaire Brian Schnell. And in the weeks ahead, we'll hear from Neighborly CFO John Schell, Express Employment Professionals Vice President Harvey Holmesy, Profit Keeper by PrimePay Senior VP Kyle McEwen, Jenny Young at the Brooklyn Robot Foundry, and more, much, much more. So subscribe today wherever you chase podcasts, and never miss an episode of Franchise Today. Until next week, I'm Stan Friedman, wishing you the best, the very best of all things franchising, and Franchise Today is out.
Franchise Today is a production of FRM Solutions, providing best-in-class CRM tools to empower relationships with prospective and existing franchisees. Find them online at frmsolutions.com. Join Stan every Wednesday at noon Eastern for another episode of Franchise Today.
When you're part of a military family, you understand sacrifice and support. At American Public University, we honor your dedication by extending our military tuition savings to your extended family. Parents, spouses, legal partners, siblings, and dependents all qualify for APU's preferred military rate of just $250 per credit hour for undergraduate and master's level programs. American Public University. Value for the whole family. Learn more at apu.apus.edu/military.